This video is going to be my review of the QuikrStuff Mach 2 bike rack. Now, I made an initial video when I got the rack and I showed the features of it. I even speculated that it could be the perfect bike rack for me. Do I still think that? Well, let's get into the video and find out. I'm going to talk about the features that I use. I'm going to talk about the things that I really like about the rack, maybe some things that I don't like about the rack. I've used it for 3 or 4 months now, and I'm ready to give my opinion on the rack, so let's go. I'm going to go ahead and install the first tray, and I'll mention a couple things that I didn't mention in the first video that I want to say here. The first thing is, like any hitch receiver bike rack, you always want to make sure you kind of shake it back and forth as you tighten the knob. And this one is no exception, so I'm going to make sure that pin's in. So as you turn this handle and you tighten it, you want to move the rack back and forth. And like I said, that's any hitch receiver bike rack. So I just wanted to mention that. That way you can make sure the rack is secure. And also with this blue knob, you have to have it, it's a safety feature. You can't have it pointed straight down. You have to have it at least parallel to the ground or up higher. That way the lock will go in. Again, that's a safety feature so you don't hit the blue knob on something when you're driving. That locks it onto the car. As I show how I use the rack, I'll talk about the things that I like and don't like. One of the things that I don't like is how hard this lever can be sometimes to pull up. It's not near as smooth as the lever on my Kuat NV 2.0. But the good thing is the tolerances are tight, and I'll talk about that coming up when I put the bikes on. So, you know, right now it's easy to pull up. So you have to pull it up to, you know, move the rack down. Then I'll drop the rack down and I'll put it into place. The other thing that I'll mention is sometimes this will pop into place because it's got a spring, and sometimes you actually have to push it in, and you want to make sure it's in. Like, I didn't mention that in the first video, but that's one thing that's really important, and I'll show it from the side what I'm talking about. So you want this silver part to go all the way forward. So like here, it's not all the way, and you just have to kind of move the rack up and down, push it forward with your finger, and that way you know it's secure and the rack's not going to drop down. So like I said, the tolerances of this are pretty tight, and it keeps the rack secure. Some people have asked me if the rack moves around, and I'll do a driving test for this review, but the bikes are really rock solid, and that's because the tolerances are tight. I'll go ahead and point out one of the things that I preferred about the Saurus MTR, and that is the way that the trays fold. So I guess I'm getting all the negatives out of the way first, because for me, the positives far outweigh the negatives on this rack. So I can slide these trays. Now that's, you know, you do this so you can fold them up, put them in your car, store them in your garage easier. But the problem is you cannot move them this way to get them out of the way when you're loading up your car. Again, the Saurus MTR, the tray's folded this way. So if you're loading the back of your car, it's easy to just get them out of the way. I wish that they went this way, but they don't. It is what it is. And let's go over the final negative for this, and then I'll start to really show the features that I love about this rack. All right, and the final one is the fact that this can stick sometimes, and it's only on the tray that is in the first position, so the one that's attached to the vehicle. So when it comes time to load a bike and you want to move this up, this red lever has to come up. And there are times where it can really be hard to move, and you just kind of have to jiggle it back and forth for a second. It's not a big deal, like it just takes an extra second, but that's how we get it ready to load a bike. Now let's go into the things that I just love about the rack. And okay, spoiler alert, this is the best bike rack I've ever used, and I'll show you why. First of all, I can have it set up just for one bike, which is honestly the way I use it 98% of the time, because I'm going to and from my office. I ride 2 or 3 days at lunch, sometimes after work, so I'm taking a bike back and forth all the time, but just one bike. And what's great about it is if I put the rack up against the car, I can still open the hatchback of my car. I don't have to worry about, is the rack up or down? If it's just set up for one bike, whether the rack is up or whether the rack is down in the position to put a bike on, doesn't matter. I can open the back of my car. Now, obviously that's not every car, but for this car, it works and I like it a lot. And the other thing is the fact that it's just one tray. Like, there's less weight. There's less to think about if you're backing up somewhere. And also, by the way, my camera, I can see, even if the rack is up, if I just have one, see, this is what I'm talking about, right? Like right now, it's kind of hard to get this lever out. I have to move the rack up and down. But even if the rack is in this position, which I have to have it in when I pull my garage, by the way, I can still see through my backup camera. When you have 2 or 3 trays, it blocks your backup camera. But that's why I like running this thing in the one bike configuration like all the time during the week. And then on the weekends when I'm going to events with a couple bikes or taking someone with me, I can add another tray. So I'll go ahead and put another tray on. I showed this in the first video, but this is hands down my favorite feature of this rack is how easily you can add multiple trays and change your configuration. So let's go ahead and drop this down. All right, so now we're gonna put on another tray. Obviously you wanna make sure that's pushed in all the way. And before I put the other trays on, this is what I do in the garage. I just have them leaning up against the wall, fold it up. Before you put it on the car, you're just gonna set it on the ground, fold out the trays, just like that. Now it's ready to put on. So all we're gonna do is hook this, slide it down, and then we're gonna move the red levers into place. On each side, you just take these red levers and put them over this bolt sticking out. That locks it on. And then to lock it onto the vehicle, you're just gonna push in that silver button. That's it. We'll put the third tray on. I'll do this all in real time so you can see how quick it is. It's on. It was like 10 seconds. So this is what the rack looks like with 3. And another thing that I like about this bike rack, just like some others, for example, the 1-Up racks, is that the trays are stepped so that the bikes in the 1 position and the 2 position won't contact handlebars. And that's really important because the bike racks that are flat, like my Kuat NV 2.0, when I had that set up as a 4-bike rack, it was really hard to get the bikes to not make contact. Now, another thing, just like the 1-Up that I'll mention when I show the bikes on here, is you can move the bikes back and forth to get them set just right, whereas the Kuat, even though you could do a little bit of maneuvering, raising the front tray up and down, it was still really hard to get the bikes to not make contact. So let's put some bikes on. The other thing that I'll mention is this is a 2-handed operation. One other thing that I liked about the Saurus MTR is the fact that you could raise these up and down with one hand. So if you're holding your bike, and I mentioned that when I was doing the review because the button was right here, so I could have the bike in one hand and then just push up and raise the tray. But just like the 1-Up, you have to lift up on the lever. So it is a 2-handed operation, but not a big deal at all. I can take these bikes and move them back and forth, and the trays will accommodate that. Let's go ahead and put this one on, and I can make sure that we don't have contact with the seat post. Now, I purposefully did not put the dropper seat post down, so you can see that even with the seat posts up, you can position bikes so they don't have contact. So now as he's putting this on, he can look at the handlebars and look at the saddles and make sure there's no contact. So there, the saddle made contact with the handlebars, so all we have to do is move it back a little bit so that there's no contact. And there, we're good to go. Again, leaving the seat posts up, which you can drop them down and make sure there's 0 contact even when you put the bikes on at first. But even with the seat posts up, no contact there. The handlebars are good, so just by positioning the bikes forwards or backwards, you can ensure that there's no contact. Someone asked me in the comments of my first video if the bikes were stable or if the rack had some movement to it, and it doesn't. Now, I mentioned that it's kind of tight getting the bike rack up or down. The good thing about that is the tolerances are really tight, and these things are super solid. The bikes, you know, whether it's 1, 2, 3, or 4 bikes on there, the bikes are super solid. The rack is solid. And so the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to go for a drive test, and I'll put the GoPro in the back of the car, and you can see how the bikes move around or don't move around as I drive. So as you can see when I'm driving, there's very little movement of the bikes on the rack, and I would say this rack is on par or better than any other bike rack that I've used as far as the bikes moving around. Definitely better than the style that has the arm that comes over the front wheel. I would recommend, however, leaving just a little bit of space between a handlebar and a seat post for that slight movement that you get, maybe an inch or so. Now, let me go ahead and mention the weight capacity, and this is from QuikrStuff's website. So if you're carrying one bike, it can be up to 120 pounds. If you're carrying two bikes, the total weight should not exceed 240 pounds. So obviously you can fit e-bikes. 3 bikes, you need to limit the entire weight to 300 pounds worth of bikes, and then 4 bikes, you need to limit it to 185 pounds, and the reason that's less is because you've got more leverage on the rack. So again, 4 bikes, 185 pounds. So you want to load the heaviest bikes first, by the way, on racks like this, and then get lighter as the bikes get further away from the vehicle. Taking bikes off just as easy. I always push the front one forward before I do the lever. It makes it easier to do. I'm going to show you how the trays come off. The first thing that you want to do is unlock this blue lock, and it does help to have the arm up so that you can access that lock, and you just use one of these barrel keys and you just find the right position, turn it, and it's open. This key is keyed for the whole rack, so it just need one key for these locks, and then of course the one that goes onto the vehicle itself. Just undo the red levers on both sides, and then you're just going to pull the tray off the vehicle. And these are pretty light. Like this, the individual trays are lighter than the one that goes into the vehicle because there's less material, but this is very light, very easy to carry around. And then if you want to fold the trays up to store them in the garage, you just push in this blue bar and fold the trays in. So that's the QuikrStuff Mach 2 bike rack. Like I said earlier, it's by far the best bike rack that I've ever used. The 2 main features that I love about the rack, well, actually 3, is that it's completely tools free. I didn't really show that in this video, but you don't need tools for anything. Raising and lowering these, completely tools free. The Saurus, just to do some comparison, I had to use an Allen wrench to move these up and down. With this one, you just turn the gold lever, and that way you can change it from mountain bike, BMX bike, whatever. Super easy to do. The other thing is, of course, how easy you can make it a 1, 2, 3, or 4 bike. You can't go more than 4, but just to be able to change the configuration within seconds, love it. And then finally, this is like the one-up, is the fact that you can move the bikes back and forth so that you don't have any handlebars hitting each other or hitting saddles. So it's expensive. I mean, let's not overlook the fact that this is a very expensive bike rack, but it's one that's going to last. I mean, this thing is made super solid. So I don't think there's a plastic part anywhere on the rack. This thing's going to last. This thing could last 20 years. I've had some cheaper bike racks that I've used for years and years. This one's going to last. It works great. Like the features are so amazing on this rack. You know, listen, I paid full price for this rack, right? I'm not sponsored by these guys. They didn't send me a demo model. I wish they would have. It would have saved me a lot of money. I paid full price. I waited a year just like everybody else is having to wait during this time of COVID supply constraint issues going on. And so I'm just telling you, like I like making videos of showing things that really work well, things that are going to last, high quality. And this rack's one of them. So that's my full review of the QuikrStuff Mach 2 bike rack. Any questions or comments that you have, drop those below. Thanks for watching.